Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new segment that we like to call Before the Hire. Before the Hire is a podcast focused on how to actually get the job in go to market tech. We break down what hiring managers look for, how top candidates stand out, and the moves that matter before the interview, during the process, and right before the offer. So, our first guest on Before the Hire is Juliet Goswell. She is the Director of Recruiting at Bets, where she leads the New York office and oversees teams ranging from recruiting coordinators to go to market recruiters and account managers. She's been in recruiting for about 5 years and took a non traditional path into the field, starting with a background in modern dance before moving into ad tech and influencer partnerships. That people driven work led her into recruiting at StudioID, where she managed a large freelance network and began building leadership experience, followed by agency recruiting at Creative People. Juliet joined Bets a few years ago as an individual contributor and has since stepped into leadership, now leading the New York office. Welcome, Juliet. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
I want everyone to know. So Juliet joined Bets not that long ago, but within no time became a people manager and is now on our leadership team. You did that so insanely fast. When you think back on your journey at Bets, does it surprise you?
It does, especially because I was in full transparency, so back and forth about the next step in my career before joining Bets. Best decision I ever made. I can say that with full honesty. And yeah, I think that I would not have expected to be in the position as quickly as I got into this position. But I'm very grateful because I had previous management experience in coming to Bets. That was one thing that I always was interested in getting back into, and kind of said that from day one. And here I am. The team supported me and allowed me to do that. So I'm super grateful. And yeah, it's been a ride.
For those that don't know, actually, when Juliet was in the process to join Bets, she was supposed to, I think, start on one team, and then the managers kind of started, oh, don't want to say fighting over her, but definitely discussions on whose team Juliet was going to start on because they were so excited about her joining the company. You obviously ended up on the right team that allowed you to grow into kind of a manager and leadership role. But it is funny to think about that time because you obviously nailed the interview process. The fact that there were people fighting over you before you ever joined the company. I think that's not that common, that people are that excited for someone to join. But right away, everyone knew Juliet has it. Whatever it is in recruiting, she has it. Do you remember anything you specifically did during your interview process that made everyone want you so bad?
Well, I appreciate you gassing me up there. But, I'm trying to think. I think it came down to, and it's a few things that I look for as well, but just like genuine human connection. I think that it's very easy in an interview process to dial back the real version of yourself and get overwhelmed with what do they want me to say? What's the right answer? And for me, I've always been a believer in you should be at a role where you can be comfortable being yourself. Ideally, especially like us in New York, we have an office we get to go into. It's so important to build that company culture. I think that's one thing that Bets has done a really good job of is like developing really strong company culture. So I think I just leaned into, of course, showing off my skill set, but really at the end of the day, showing who I am as a human being and how that could blend into what Bets had already created from a culture and just like skill set perspective. So yeah, I think that that's probably one thing that I've always taken into all of my interviews. I'm not going to try to be a version of myself to fit into one specific picture for a company. I'm going to be who I am when I'll be in the job every day, because if not, then I probably won't be successful.
Absolutely makes sense. But you were obviously already a recruiter prior to
Yeah.
joining Bets. Do you think being a recruiter sets you up for an interview process? Or does it make you think twice, three times because you know what it's like on the other side? Do you think it's a pro or a con?
I think it can be such a double-sided coin on that. Like I think on the one end, it sets you up because you know the basic rules. Connect with the person before the interview, do your homework, do your research, always send a thoughtful thank you that shows what you learned and explains why you'd be a good fit for the job after the fact. Those are kind of like the no-brainers because it's things we tell candidates all the time. But on the other end, I think you can get in your head, right? There are so many best practices that I've shared with candidates throughout my career. And you can go into an interview and be like, oh, did I say that correctly? Or did I ramble too long when talking about my background and experience? Or did I really answer the question that they asked me? So yeah, I think it can be a bit of a double-edged sword, but as a recruiter, I think if you just lean into like, okay, what are the baseline best practices and try to shake everything else, then hopefully you'll be in a good spot.
Yeah, I always think about this because they say doctors make the worst patients. And very often they are, hypochondriacs. So I always find it really interesting if recruiters actually make the best candidates or actually the worst.
Yeah.
I've done obviously interviews and I've been the hiring manager for my own team, but not for other companies. I don't come from that type of recruitment. So it's very interesting to me. And even working at Vets, I was very intrigued by the job of a recruiter. I didn't realize how all encompassing it was and how time consuming it is. For those that don't know exactly what a recruiter does
Mhm.
or does not do, can you explain it to them?
Of course. I think at a very baseline, and of course, it depends if you're in house, agency, how senior you are in the role, but at a baseline, a recruiter is someone who is sourcing talent to fill a position, as basic as that sounds. Of course, it goes a lot deeper than that. At least in the agency world, we're really there to be the liaison between our clients and our candidates. So not only is our team sourcing and finding the talent, doing extensive screening interviews with these candidates to make sure that it's a fit on both ends, sending over background and information to the client. From there, you're very much that candidate's advocate through the interview process. Everything down from why the client would want to hire them and why they are a good fit for our client. But on the other end, like, is this something the candidate's actually even interested in? You work with both the candidates and the client from initial kind of interview screen through negotiation and contract. So we're there to support our clients and hey, this is what we expect these candidates are going to want compensation wise. And on the other end, with the candidates looking to counter and needs negotiation support, we're there to do that as well. So yeah, at a baseline, we're really there to find the talent, but it goes a lot deeper than that. And I think those are the things that tend to get overlooked at a high level when people think about what a recruiter does on a day to day.
So, what's the difference between an in house recruiter and an agency recruiter, like you said?
Yeah, totally. I think that at a baseline, they both have, regardless if you're in house or at an agency, you're going to be managing that candidate's experience. So I've worked with amazing in house recruiters when I've interviewed in my career who have always been an advocate for me. They'll take the first round with me. They walk me through the entire process. They make sure I'm good to go and prepped for every round. The biggest difference is that, of course, when you're an in house recruiter, you're taking intake calls with your potential hiring managers, but they're at the company you work for. So you have a bit of a leg up because you really know the ins and outs of why you want to work here. You would be able to speak to it the best because you're an employee of that company, but you're working most of the time with various hiring managers, understanding their needs, why they want to be hired, or what they want in an upcoming hire. In the agency realm of things, you work with a lot of different clients at a time. Here at Bats, I think we're lucky enough to build really lasting, meaningful relationships with our clients, especially most of our clients are with us for 1 year, 2 year, 5 years plus. We get to see them build their teams. So in those instances, we very much feel like an extension of those clients. And I always feel like in my career here at Bets, there's been a few clients where I'm like, I feel like I'm their internal recruiter, which is a really exciting and nice thing to be able to put yourself in that position. But of course, you don't work there, right? So there's a level of trying to understand as much as you need from that client to be able to make sure that you're finding the information that or you're finding the candidate that they need. The difference on the agency side of things is, of course, you're not working in house, so you will do your best to really get into the shoes of your client and understand what their company culture is and what they're looking for in hires. And, is this a founding hire? Is this their 10th hire, their 50th hire? Luckily, at here at Bets, we have the opportunity to partner with our clients for 1 year, 3 years, 5 years, see their teams grow. So in those instances, you do feel like you're a part of their team internally, but the intake calls are very different. So you're having a kickoff with that client, understanding all of their needs, everything from how should we pitch a candidate on why they're interested in joining your company? What are the need to haves in these specific hires? And then it's our job to hit the market. We do a lot of market mapping and kind of just data grabbing to understand who's out there, who would be a good fit for these clients. We bring that back to the client. And then if we have to, shift the spec of things, we're there to partner with them and really be kind of a extension of their internal recruiting team.
Absolutely. And I know we'll have a lot of people listening who are looking for a job because they're either unemployed or just unhappy or ready for that next move. And I'm sure a question they all have is, how do you find the candidates? How do they end up on your radar and get interviews to exciting jobs?
Yeah, great question. At a baseline, I think almost all in-house recruiters and agency recruiters use LinkedIn. That is kind of the mecca of candidate profiles. We all have one, we all use one. There are a lot of things that go into sourcing a candidate through LinkedIn in an accurate way that will yield the results you're looking for. And I think if you want to be a candidate who stands out and is showing up on a Boolean search or something we're doing on the back end, it's all about building your profile out in a way that taps into your expertise in some of those keywords or accomplishments that you've had. We hire in sales here at Bets, so I'll use sales folks as an example, but I always recommend highlight your successes, right? It's not always black and white, but sometimes can be in sales. What was your quota attainment over the last year or last couple quarters? Have you hit President's Club? What are other accolades? How much revenue have you generated for the business? What are those numbers that are going to stand out to a recruiter that would get them excited to want to reach out and get you on the phone? Another thing is, I think if you have specific industry expertise, highlighting that as keywords on your profile as well. More than ever, we've found that our clients are really looking for people to step into roles who know how to speak to their ICP and know how to speak to their buyer. And with that, a lot of the searches that we do, yes, at a baseline can just be like, oh, types of companies they've worked for. But every salesperson, for the most part, ends up being broken into different buckets, whether it's territories they're covering, industries that they are primarily working with. And those are the things that are definitely worth highlighting on your profile so that if a recruiter is doing a back end search, those keywords will quickly pop up and will be more likely to see you.
So, where on their LinkedIn should they be adding these details? Is it the top headline, like I'm the director of recruiting at Vets, or is it underneath each job they've had in the little about you blurb? Where should they be adding this information to be picked up?
So, with kind of Boolean and keyword searches, this can really be anywhere on your profile and it will pull in on the back end of LinkedIn if it's working correctly. Sometimes it doesn't always, but I normally recommend you can have a little blurb about yourself. I don't think you need to get too overly verbose in that, but just at a high level, who you are and what you do. And then I normally recommend, again, if we're taking it back to sales folks, it's like, okay, in your current role under your current job, what's your quota attainment? What are your accolades? What types of clients are you working with? And it can be just a couple bullet points. It doesn't need to be anything too crazy, but that's normally where I put it. I do see some people's titles getting very long, and it's like account executive, dog mom, President's Club winner, couple other slashes in there. I love it. Like, again, show your personality. I'm not here to judge, but sometimes I think that like a short and sweet and clear title on what your current role is all you need, and you can leave that other stuff for the bio.
How do you feel about the ex Meta, ex Microsoft, ex Apple edition?
I'm gonna scroll down on your profile, so I will probably see that you are X those companies. Again, if you've worked places that are incredibly impressive and you want to highlight that in your title, great. I'm gonna click on your profile regardless and see it. With that being said, if you are a person in the go-to-market space and you're looking for a job, make yourself a Bets Connect profile. It's a no-brainer. Probably reason number one or two that I joined Bets was because of our software. I've never seen anything like it. It's incredibly comprehensive and easy to use. And when our team starts a search, it's the first place we go. So we have just so many hundreds of thousands of candidates and a great kind of sourcing and filtering system that we can use that it makes sense to just start there for us. So it would be interesting to see the actual breakdown, but I'd say it's always our first place that we're going to find talent. And then if we don't have them in network, then we're shifting over to LinkedIn. A couple years ago, I'd say probably like 30 to 40% of our talent was coming from Connect. I'd say probably now it's 50 to 60%. And with that, even if someone isn't initially coming up in our search on Connect, when we go into LinkedIn, 9 times out of 10, they already have a profile, and then we can reach out to them directly there. So we've had a lot of advancements in the software recently, and I think it's only going to continue to grow how easily it is for us to find candidates there.
Absolutely. And I know candidates can make their own profile on Connect. Would this be a recommendation? I know we said, how do you get in front of a recruiter? Obviously, Connect is just bets, but how useful or helpful is it for candidates kind of go about it in that way versus just staying on LinkedIn?
Super useful. Just another opportunity for you to be found by our recruiters. Here at Bets, we specialize in go to market. So you can go in and create a profile for yourself, and you'll automatically be paired with a recruiter here at Bets. Now, I cannot always promise you that we will have an opportunity for you. Do I wish that we could get every person in our platform a job? 100%. But it totally ebbs and flows in the types of roles we're working on. So if you just go to our main website, you can log in and create a profile for yourself. You'll get connected with a recruiter on our team. And from there, they'll let you know if there's anything. And if not, it basically just allows you to be more visible to the rest of our recruiters when we do have searches that fit your background and expertise.
So, speaking of someone's background, how important do you think in today's market, specifically in go to market tech, your school is? If you went to undergrad, grad, if you went to an Ivy or not? I know this is still a question a lot of people have. How important for our clients are these things?
I would say probably about 10% of my team's clients or clients that I've worked with over the last couple of years, that's a need to have for them that you went to a top school or an Ivy. I think it's becoming less and less important. There still, of course, are certain clients who, whether it's their founding team, all has incredibly impressive schooling and backgrounds, and they want that in the team that they're building. But I think we're moving away from it. I think experience and what you've been able to do post undergrad is just as, if not more important. I personally, when hiring, have never looked at someone's school and thought, oh, yeah, I need to hire this person because they went X place. It's what they do in an interview process, and it's their background and experience and like real life experience that I find is more important. And honestly, even for my clients that really want people from top schools, if you have the right background, like they're probably going to hire you anyways. It's probably 50-50 on clients that require a degree and don't. It's easier to get a role fresh out of college if you have a degree rather than if you've taken a more unconventional path. But if you're someone that has 5-10 years of professional experience in general, but you never got a degree, again, your professional experience is going to outweigh what you would have learned in school 10 years ago.
I'm sure that's comforting to a lot of people who did not go to Ivies. So there's a lot of other things that can happen in your career that make it harder for you to land a gig. So obviously, some things you can do is update your LinkedIn, create a profile on Connect. Would you recommend they start actively connecting with recruiters on LinkedIn or emailing them? For example, if someone right now is listening saying, okay, Bets works with incredible clients, all the way from OpenAI to Harvey to Profound to Cloudflare, whatever it is, a lot of really incredible clients. And it's like, I want to work at those places. How do I get in front of them, right? I've created my profile, but no one's reached out to me yet. Should they actively be messaging everyone?
Yeah, there's a balance for sure. I think what I will lead with and what I wish that every recruiter, both in-house and agency, had more time for was to comb through all of the messages we get. I probably get 20 to 30 messages on LinkedIn a day. I do my best to respond to everyone, but it can be really tough. How to cut through that noise would be one of two things. If the person's email is readily available, I would shoot them an email because I think LinkedIn messages, you get so many of them. If not, shoot them a note on LinkedIn and just be really clear in the outreach. Make the subject line, looking for work, type of role, something short and sweet. And then in the email, hi, my name is X. I have X years of experience in this industry. I'm looking to pivot into this type of a role. I live in New York. I'm open to in-office roles or I want remote. What are the baseline we need to know about you? And here's a copy of my resume and a link to my LinkedIn. And that's that. Where you get lost in the noise is just like, hey, I'm looking for work. What does that mean? We want to know in 3 bullet points your background at a high level, what you're looking to do, and where you live. Because from there, I can look at that and say, oh, great, here's an enterprise account executive who lives in New York, who has AI experience, is looking to join Series A or earlier startup. Right off the bat, I have these 3 roles. Let's connect. So I think it's just being clear in your outreach.
I know there's a hot topic across kind of the recruiters at Bets, and a lot of recruiters feel strongly about this is hoppiness.
Mm.
And sometimes people job hop because they want to from a place of privilege, always being offered the next role. And sometimes, unfortunately, there's rifts, layoffs, stuff happens, especially in the post during COVID world. What is your take? And what would you tell candidates who struggle with a CV that shows short stints?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, if you look at my LinkedIn or my CV, I am pretty hoppy on paper. Couple years here, year here, 2 years here, now a couple years at Bets. In the recruiting world, it's pretty common. A lot of people get impacted by rifts for the first, especially if you're in-house, you're the first to get cut when companies aren't hiring. But I think that it's all about the story you can tell. So that's where if you have a recruiter in your corner and someone who can speak to the why behind your career moves, that will help. I think there's a fine line, of course, right? Like if there were massive layoffs, 20% of the business, whatever it might be, and you were caught up in that, even top performers, unfortunately, are going to be impacted. It's always the newest hire in, first out. But I do think that there's something to be said about someone I get on the phone with and they move jobs every year. And it's always like, oh, this company poached me and they could pay me more. Totally hear you. Make as much money as you possibly can. But if you can have loyalty in 1 or 2 of your last 3 or 4 jobs, that helps a lot. If it's 3 or 4 short stints in a row and every time has been like, yeah, I don't know, didn't feel right or wanted more money or whatever it might be, that's a harder picture for us to paint to our clients when we tell them why they should interview you versus, I was impacted by layoffs here, but here were my numbers. I still was doing what I had to do. Then I joined this company and ultimately realized that the industry wasn't something I was passionate about. And now in my last role, I've been here for 3 years. I've grown in X capacity, but my leader who hired me that I really enjoyed working with left, and it feels like the right time to look. So it's a balance. There are people on my team who are like, I see short stints. I'm absolutely not reaching out. I am not that person. I think there can always be a story there, but what is that story? And after, 4 or 5 stints, how are you explaining it?
Yeah, so the average tenure of the recruiters at Bets is 5+ years. I know we've recruiters here who've been here for over a decade. What would you say a good tenure is, and what is too long? And is there such a thing as too long? When a candidate comes to you, they've been somewhere for 12 years. Is that also a red flag?
Yeah, I think that too short in a row is for me anything under a year and a half, multiple times in a row. Because again, you also lack ability to grow if you're somewhere for that short of a period. I think too long. Once you're somewhere for like over 8 years, I'm curious to know what progression you've had in the role, maybe even over like 6. If it's clear to me that like you've had continued growth, that's great. But if it feels like you've been sitting in the same role that whole time, have you just gotten complacent? And you know what? That's totally fine. I don't think everyone needs to, depends on your role, right? I guess if you're in sales, same thing with recruiting. You're probably working hard and hitting numbers and you want to be someone who's a bit of a grinder. That's just like the nature you have when you're in these roles. I think that if I've seen a lack of progression over 6, 7, 8 years in the same company, then my concern is, especially here at Bets, because we really primarily hire for startups, is how is that shift from being somewhere where you're probably pretty comfortable going to be moving into an earlier stage company where you're wearing a lot of hats and probably have less resources than you do now since you've been with your current org for very long. Again, I think I have a conversation with those people regardless, but like I'm really testing what are your career motivators and why are you looking now after all this time?
Absolutely. So our marketing manager, Nikki, is also on the podcast here with us. And I know you have some questions for Juliet. Do you want to ask her about the green flags or anything like that that she likes to see in candidates?
Yeah, of course. Happy to be talking with you, Juliet. One thing that you had mentioned when we were asking, before the call, we were asking, what are some of the red flags that kind of give you pause as you're looking at a resume? And you mentioned the you pitch me attitude. I'd love to hear a little bit about what that entails.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, look, it is such a two-way street when you are going into an interview and when you're being interviewed. I definitely don't think that interviewees should expect that a prospective hiring manager is going to know everything about them and be like, I need to hire this person just because your resume looks really good. On the flip side, it's also the job of the interviewer to share reasons why they would want to work there. It's definitely a two-way street, but something I've seen a lot of recently, especially with those people who have had a million presidents clubs and are at 200% to quota and all of these amazing things, that's incredible. And congrats to you. But you still need to show up for an interview and pitch yourself, be able to have your high level background of who you are and why you're successful, and do a little bit of research. If you go into an interview thinking, this person would be crazy not to hire me, but you don't do any background searching on who you're speaking with, what does their product do at a high level? What are some of the problems that their company is solving for? It doesn't need to be anything crazy. Hello, ChatGPT exists. Type in a few quick things. I'm interviewing for a account executive job at this company. And here are some of the things that I want to learn from the conversation. Give me some advice on like how to prepare, or give me a rundown of what the most recent funding is or any exciting articles from online. Like, take the 5 minutes and do your research, because that is what's going to also separate you. The amount of times I've interviewed people that on paper are amazing and they come in so underprepared, don't know anything about me, don't know anything about Bets Recruiting, but just expect that they're going to move forward in the interview process because of their background. I don't want to hire that person. I want to take a chance on the person who maybe there's a few things they need to work on, but they're super engaged and can explain why they are a fit from the research they've done about us. That goes a long way. Again, I'm not saying that you need to spend hours and hours for a first round interview, but even if you're just opportunistic, show up how you would want someone to show up for you.
100%. I'm curious, do you see that more amongst Gen Z, or is there a specific demographic that you see that with? Because a lot of the people that we've talked to on the podcast, we've dived into the topic of millennial versus Gen Z approach to job applications. And as we know, Gen Z is really faced with a tough job market. And I think sometimes that does lead to that fatigue of, and maybe that you pitch me attitude. Obviously, everybody should come to their interviews prepared. But I'm curious if you've seen that within the different demographic groups, or if a specific group.
It varies. I actually think I see it with people who are more tenured in their career, and I don't blame them. Like, on paper, it's look at everything I've done. They're probably the people that have a million companies knocking their door down. So they're like, if I don't need to prepare for this one because I got the next one. So I think if anything, it's actually more millennials, just because we're a little more seasoned in our careers. I think it's an intentional lack of preparation with people who are more seasoned. I think with Gen Z, is Gen Alpha out of school yet? Is that the newest generation? I'm not even sure. I don't, they're probably still in school, but so anyone who's a recent grad or Gen Z, sorry, I don't know my years there. If they come underprepared, it's not a cognitive choice. It's more of a lack of knowledge and knowing. And that's where partnering with a recruiter when you're early in your career can be really beneficial, because when you go in thinking, just going to talk about what I did in college and why I'm interested, that might not be enough. And then you partner with a recruiter who's like, hey, do your research. Why this company? Why this product? You just need someone once or twice to tell you to do it. And then you're like, oh, duh, this is second nature. So I think it's the impetus behind the decision making of I'm underprepared is either a cockiness because I have so much experience, or just like a naiveness for someone who's a fresher grad.
Yeah, for sure. That makes sense. And I appreciate you showing love to Gen Z. I feel like typically Gen Z is usually the one that's facing the brunt of things. So it's nice to hear someone show love towards Gen Z. And I'm curious too, talking about pitching yourself, what is the best pitch that you've heard from a candidate? Or is there a specific formula or a way that you would recommend, in those first 30 seconds, minute when someone's in an interview? What's the best way someone could formulate their pitch? Because I know a lot of people listening are probably doing many of those as they're interviewing right now.
Yeah, again, totally depends on experience. If you're someone who has 10, 15 years plus of experience, my recommendation is always start with your current role and the highlights from it. If you're in a sales role, being able to just touch upon the impact that you've had on a business, whether it's revenue wise or retention wise or whatever it might be, President's Club accolades, things like that. Of course, you don't want to seem overly cocky, but just the 30 seconds of, I'm Juliet here at Best Recruiting. I'm leading a team of X, Y, and Z. I've been able to have our team outperform by X percentages. We have this client retention, and my specialties lie in X, Y, and Z industry. Prior to that, I have about 5-10 years of experience in various industries. And you can kind of keep it short and sweet. And then you say, happy to dive into some of my earlier career experience if you want to hear more. I think where you overwhelm an interviewer is when you go in with 5 minute plus, here's everything you need to know from when I graduated 10 years ago until where I'm at now. So again, the more experienced, I think the more you focus on what you've been doing recently and kind of how your career is defined prior to that, and then ask, what else do you want to know? Or how else can I dive into more specific experience earlier? If you're someone who's more green in their career, I always say work in chronological order for those people. What did you do in undergrad, internships, any extracurriculars, sports, anything of that nature? When did you graduate / what did you study? And then what you've been doing since then. For people who just graduated, that probably won't take you very long. Again, you want to highlight the things that are most important that might kind of work for the role you're interviewing for, but always work in chronological order. I think it's always good to ask a question. Happy to dive into anything specific, or if you want to hear more about internship X that I mentioned.
Amazing. I know that's going to help a lot of people. So I appreciate you, laying that out, especially for those new grads. New grads really struggle with translating when they don't have that professional experience. So even finding ways to integrate those metrics within from their background or translatable skills and things that they worked on is very helpful.
Yeah, so it's funny because as Juliet was talking, an old experience kind of came screaming back to me. I think oh my God, this was such a long time ago. One of my earlier interviews, they asked me, "Oh, so talk to us about your work history." And I literally started at the bottom of my CV and worked my way up, versus what you should do is just talk about your most recent relevant experience, and kind of you can still go back if they need you to. And I
Yeah.
think I literally sat there and I did like a 10-minute monologue about everything I'd ever done in my life. And it wasn't that interesting because I was young. And I think, needless to say, did not get that job. And I was mortified afterwards. I think I realized what I was doing it as I was doing it, but it was too late to stop. And I'm still embarrassed just thinking back to that. So I just want to say to those who have done that, I see you, I hear you. It does get better.
It's easy to do. And look, I think that you should start with I have 15 years of experience in marketing and I've been able to grow X, Y, and Z. Most recently, blah, blah, blah. Give them the background to an extent.
Should be like, I had a newspaper route when I was 12. Not that that didn't show that, I'm a hard worker
Well, right.
and I get up with the rain.
Yeah, when they ask tell me about something difficult that you were able to overcome. And it's when I was 12 and the paper route that I was working on, it rained every day and I had to figure out how to get the papers to my neighbors without them being sopping wet.
I mean, it may or may not have happened that one day I refused to go out because it was raining and I didn't want to go. And my mom literally pushed me out the door and closed it because she's like, "You wanted to do this, so you go do this." My parents are amazing. I just want to put that out there in case they're listening. I love you. Help me build some backbone there and follow through, because I was young. I was definitely like, I don't want to do this today. This is awful. With that, we're almost at time. So the last question I think we want to ask you is just one major red flag that you've seen throughout the candidate process that candidates should avoid doing.
Yeah, so I think this is something that's like a little less on paper than it is when you talk about your background and experience. There's two things that I think of, and this is again when I'm hiring for my team specifically. One of them is inability to articulate your motivators and why and what you're looking for. Again, the job market can be tough, so we're not always going to land the dream job. Although I can promise you the job you don't think 100% about might turn into the dream job, so you never know. But with that being said, when people feel like they're trying to push themselves too hard into a role that clearly isn't what they're interested in or looking for, that's a big red flag for me. Or when I'm hiring for my clients, my first question to a candidate is always, what are your career motivators? What's the dream job look like? What are you ideally looking for? They go through that rundown and then they end up, I share a couple roles with them and I'm like, honestly, this one probably isn't a fit because you said you were looking for X, Y, and Z. And they're like, it's fine, whatever. Again, take every interview. But at the end of the day, if you can't go into an interview and express why there's genuine interest there, you're not going to be successful long-term in that role. And going back to the job hoppiness and the longevity, I think too often we push ourselves into things that we don't actually want. So that would be one thing. And then I think the second thing, again, this comes out when you're chatting with people, but we're moving back into more of an in-office, in-person collaboration, team-oriented type of environments. And I personally really struggle to hire people who have really big egos and aren't team players or aren't coachable. I'm not saying I have every answer in the world, but when I talk to potential hires for my team and I ask them about experiences where they came short and it was their fault and what did they learn from it? If you can't own up to the fact that you've had failures that you've hopefully learned from, no one has it all figured out. Be honest, be a human. More than anything, just be a human being during an interview process. And I promise you, it will get you further than if you think you're saying all the right things.
I think what kind of rounds out this interview very nicely is the idea of being authentic and why during the interview process you stood out and everyone loved you. Like you said, you were just being yourself. You were authentically Juliet and no one can ask for more. And that allows the interviewer to decide whether or not you're the right person. So I really appreciate that. Thank you, Juliet, for sharing everything with us. It was really interesting to hear. And for those listening, if there's any questions you wish I'd ask, please comment them. You can send me a DM. You can send Nikki a DM. You can send Juliet a DM. Yes. We're all available. I don't get as many as Juliet does, so it might be easier to reach me than Juliet. But thank you, everyone, for listening. And this was our very first episode of Before the Hire. Thank you so much. And thank you, Juliet and Nikki.
Thank you.
Thank you.